Introduction to myself. I'm going to let you read that for yourselves because I think most people now have joined the previous webinars, so know me. So my name's Lucinda. Background in psychology, a learning and development professional. I host the HR Uprising Podcast. Some of you may listen to that. And actually, if you don't, there will be a link in the email that comes out to you because we always close down. We tend to find that people say, please, can I have the slides? So don't worry, we will provide you with the slides. We'll email you out with a link to the slides. The video will go on the website. And also, I did a podcast on this about 6 months ago, 4 to 6 months ago. And so we'll link to that podcast because it actually, if you wanted to remind yourself of some of the stuff I'm discussing, you might want to listen to it there. Do link in, connect with me. There's all my connection there. It's great to be connected on social media and to build that network. Okay, so the purpose of this webinar is to basically talk about the principles of building a successful team. I guess if you guys, as you're typing in there, just to give me an idea of sort of roles that you carry out, so have I got people professionals, HR, L&D, managers? Feel free to let me know the job titles that you do, what you do. So, you know, I suppose the context that you're looking at this from. So are you someone who maybe a people professional who needs to help others build professional teams, or a trainer, or are you a manager trying to build your own successful team? Or have you got two hats on? I guess we might. And I'll look down that in a moment and you can all check out who else is here. You can look in the chat yourself. So it's a reminder of the principles, I should say, of building a successful team. I'm not going to share anything that I think is rocket science, but I'm hopefully going to pull it together in a way that you could use for the future and would be helpful. We'll briefly look at how are things different, because successful teams on their own are important in their own right, but there is an additional complication potentially by us being forced to be more virtual than previously, and that's the angle we'll also explore here. We're going to look at Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team as one of the things. We'll also look at Tuckman's team roles, a quick insight into personality tests and Belbin's roles, and I'm going to wrap this all in a set of slides that you could actually use yourselves if you were trying to kick off a virtual team. Clearly you'd adapt them, but it's something that you could use as a formula. I've used it many times successfully before to kick off a successful team. So that's how this is going to be slightly different, in that we've almost got two hats. I've got some slides which are for us here as the overview of what we're trying to do, thinking sort of strategically about what we're trying to achieve, and some slides that you could repurpose if you were working with a virtual team yourself or your own virtual team and you wanted to make them more effective. In an ideal world, you'd do it as soon as possible when a new team is forming. Okie dokes. So I'll just have a quick scan down, seeing where everyone's from. Bristol, all over the place. Hertfordshire, Gemma, I'm in Hertfordshire, and Bedfordshire, not too far away. So we have got lots of sunshine, lucky people, lots of L&D people, HR finance and director. Okay, coach and manager, 2 hats, commercial manager. So hopefully it's pretty relevant to everybody here. And we all have to work in teams, so it's always relevant. Thanks guys for sharing your roles. Okay, so going into this, so I'm now slipped into where if you were kicking off a virtual team, you might have, ideally in the old, you'd have like half a day together if you were really lucky, or even longer, but let's say you've got 90 minutes, something like that, 90 minutes to 2 hours. You can go through some of this content in that. Now I'm going to go through quite a lot of content, so I'll go reasonably rapidly. I will aim to keep this to as close to 30 minutes as possible. It may stray to 40 minutes. I know people can't always stay that long because I try to make it interactive. So there's a few polls as we go through it, but I'll keep going and we will record it so you can refer back if people have to drop off. So in terms of this, I would, if I was setting off anything, I would always start off with the agenda, a bit like I started off with the learning points here. This would be the content that I'm saying you'd be quite useful to share if you were setting up a team. So you do an introduction and outcomes, you do an icebreaker, you do something about understanding yourselves, you then explain some team theory, which I'll go through with you, and then you would set a team purpose and ground rules or charter, essentially setting teams up for success. I know I've got L&D professionals on here who will know all this. It's so important. The way you start something, it's hard to come back and tell people they've done something wrong if you didn't establish the ground rules in the first place. But the purpose of this is setting yourselves up to go through a journey with a group of people who are working together for the first time and get them to set that purpose and ground rules, because then they can hold each other accountable. So that might be an example of the agenda that you would set up. Then I'd say the sort of outcomes that we're looking to, because we're a team, let's imagine we're a huge virtual team that are all working together. What we want to get out of this activity or this meeting is we want to get insight into our own personalities and preferences. We want to gain a greater appreciation and knowledge about our differences, because that will help us work together better. We want to understand the value of conflict in building a successful team. And I think that's a very interesting point, which about virtual teams and how easy it is to build them effectively. I will see whether you agree over the course of this. And we want to end with clarity and commitment to the team purpose and ground rules. So that would be the sort of thing that I would say, these are the planned outcomes of this session, how long it might be. I would then run into something, some kind of introduction or icebreaker. Now, you could all Google icebreakers and introductions, maybe type in the chat if you've got a particular favorite. It really depends on how much time you've got as to which one you should use, but it's a bunch of people getting together for the first time. So it's a very minimum, you should do something which is a sort of question type thing, whether it's a 2 truths and a lie, or I've done them where I've had a series of questions like, what's my top strength? What's my favorite chocolate? No, yeah, you could. It could be as personal or as personality driven. You can go down any lines, really. You know, where do I love to go on holiday? What's my biggest passion? I've done things where we had bingo, where people had to find other people with different things. Takes a bit longer. Other icebreakers, people bingo is good, isn't it? Yeah, I've had great success with that. Other things which is a good, if you've got extra time, I've done something, and I used to do it when we did face-to-face training courses, that actually I thought you could just about get away with in a virtual team. So I've done it where you had people in different teams and they had to build Lego, but the person who had the Lego to build didn't have the instructions. Now let's face it, that's virtual. So we used to artificially put them in another room and get them to talk over communication. And then they have to realize their communication style. Again, it depends what you want them to learn as to what the icebreaker is. Sometimes you can take learning from an icebreaker into then the personality types and our differences. So Mark's saying, who am I is a good one. Five things on the post that people wouldn't know about you. You'd have to read them out and get them to guess who it is. And then get the real I am stand up. Nice, I like this. Any more of these that come in, we'll see if we can paste them and put them together. So whatever the icebreaker is that you think is appropriate to do. I thought also you could probably do scavenger hunts or something, although that's just pure fun or silliness, but you could probably even do these sort of things virtually. Depending on the time available to you, then do something to get people warmed up, get them talking. Icebreakers are very important for just getting everyone on a level, because not everyone is as comfortable as others to speak. Then you're going to, right, the purpose of us being here, we talk about what's a high-performing team. You can do your own slides in terms of that. I might talk about sports teams if you've had time with that. Always good to get a picture of the Rugby World Cup final where we're actually winning something. But you might say a high group performing team, let's have a definition. What we want to be, we come together in order to achieve a purpose. So the definition of a high performing team is a small group of people so committed to something larger than themselves that they will not be denied. That's just a nice quote that I like. It's just give something, this is what we're aspiring to, this inspiring in terms of our overall purpose. There's a couple of people in the waiting room, Helen. So then what I would do, having set the expectations, I've set an icebreaker, and I mean, this could be 15 minutes in or it could be 2 hours in, depending on the luxury of time that you have available. If at all possible, I would use some sort of personality tool and activity. Now, I know there are people who detest personality tools because they don't like to be boxed. But I actually find that they're incredibly valuable in this. It's not about saying there's a right or a wrong approach. It's because personality tools help us appreciate differences, and they bring them to life. Now, some of you will have personality tools and favorite ones out here. So I thought I'd get us to do some polls here on this. Let me just get my polls up, see if I can find them. Sorry, I can't. Oops, I've gone too far.
Do you Want me to?
Can you see the polls, Helen?
Yes.
I can't see it. Can you put the personality tool one, please?
Yep.
Thank you. So there's no right answer. You can choose any of the ones that you are familiar with or like, but I just thought those ones that I put up there are the ones I know the best. And it's interesting to see which ones work well and otherwise. So you can put as many as you like really on here. Keep voting. Keep voting. Feel free to keep voting. So what I'll do is I'll talk as we go through it and we can look at the results. Yes, it is being recorded, don't worry. So what I would say is, in terms of personality tools, I think they have a place as long as you appreciate to appreciate differences. And part of the key to being successful in a team is appreciating differences, because you might be good at something that I'm not good at, and vice versa. And often differences bring conflict, which is viewed negatively. Actually, conflict in a team can be viewed positively. So this brings you the opportunity to share that. So of the tools that we put here, all personality tools have their place, and there are other ones that I'm not familiar with. What I'd say though is some are easier than others to use in this context. So for example, Myers-Briggs, which everybody's heard of, is one of the most well-known ones. Personally, I think it doesn't lend itself brilliantly to this sort of setup. The reason being it's quite complicated. My experience is the ones that work the best in team setup are ones that are quite simple with things like colors. So the SDI, if you've used that as a color one, social styles is pretty much free and you can link it to colors. It's been around donkey's years. Insights is also like that. Prism is like that, bit more complicated. But the ones that are quite simple probably work better in this sort of context, because you can then get this sort of sense of language or term. So a number of them would say that a red behavior is someone who is a driver, is task orientated, target orientated. Sometimes the negative, anything like that, those are all positives of someone. The allowable weakness of someone who is like that, also a shaper in Belbin, would be that they are sometimes a bit abrasive. So they're good at setting the goals and creating urgency, but they may not be good at taking people with them. And there'll be flip sides to other styles. If you're more analytical, which that tends to be a green or a blue in these color ones, then actually you might need to think things through earlier. You might not feel comfortable shouting out. You might want to know the facts. There might be a natural conflict between you and someone in a different style. None of them tell the whole story. Don't get me wrong, none of them tell the whole story. But what they do is they give you a common language, and they get people talking, because people like talking about themselves. They go, oh, I'm this, what are you? And that helps people appreciate where they've got similarities or differences. And that will help you understand how well you're going to form as a team, and gives you that information as to what to go through it. So those ones there, and as I say, there are other ones that you can definitely use as well. I think you see that some of the other ones that have got a bit more complexity, Discord Thomas, are brilliant for things like recruitment. Some of the ones that are actually robust, or OPQ. Myers-Briggs I think is better maybe in coaching or one-on-one. Something that's simple, it tends to work best. Now I have actually, we can stop sharing the results there. I've just gone to outline Belbin, because but although Belbin doesn't have colours, Belbin has specific uses that also Prism has too. Not many people have used Prism. Belbin is about team roles during a project. So Belbin is very specifically about team. And where it is quite helpful is if you are on a project that's got a start, middle and end, and you're trying to achieve something, knowing those different styles is helpful. Now it looks like 57% of you are familiar with Belbin, which is great, but I've said this is, I mean, you can use these different styles at different places in a project, but it's maybe useful to think, okay, at the start, who do we want to be the team leader? Well, actually, you almost certainly don't want the completer, finisher, monitor, evaluator necessarily, team worker necessarily to be the team leader. But equally, you don't want the shaper necessarily, if they're a very strong shaper, to be the team leader, because they might override people. You might go for someone who's got more of a coordinator preference to be that team leader, because they're more inclined to bring others in. So all of these Belbin roles have got allowable strengths and weaknesses. Resource investigator, great at starting things, pretty hopeless at finishing things. Now, bear in mind that I'm talking about them as if they're one person. We would all, if we did a Belbin report, have probably 3 strengths and maybe 3 achievable roles. So it's not to say that I'm not able to do it. It's more that if I had a very strong preference for resource investigator and very low completer finisher and monitor evaluator, which I happen to have, I'm not great at the end of a project. It's hard work for me. So I'm better working with people who are good at that. People with things like plant, that's about creativity and ideas, so bringing them into play. Shapers I've talked about earlier, good at overcoming resistance. Implementers, they're fantastic for getting stuff done. So once they understand things, but they may find it hard to get started. So all of us, all of these, monitor evaluator spots the issues, but might get into analysis paralysis. Can say the same thing for completer finisher. Team workers, lovely people to be around, absolutely want to help people promote harmony, but may not be prepared to enter into conflict, which sometimes is something that's needed. So there's no rights and wrongs, but what's helpful is appreciating difference and how we look as an overall team, because that's going to give you an indication of how effective you are. Now, it's only an indication because with awareness, you can choose to be really effective, because you can realize that we're very heavy in completers for some reason. That might mean that sometimes we're slow to get things done, and you might consider bringing other people into the team. So as I say, it's only one tool. I like personality tools in the right place. They're not fact, but they educate you, and I think they're really valuable for understanding difference. Yes, just seeing other ones. I'm not familiar with Tetramap. Let's see others. Got your own high performing teams tool. That sounds interesting. Love to know more about that. Value orientation. I've got loads of things out here. Some other ideas if you want those, guys. Personality Neo I think is great, but that is that's more about the dark side and things like that. I think that's more, it's an in-depth analysis. So I would personally use something like that in a one-to-one, in a coaching tool, as a coaching tool. So it's maybe the sort of I hesitate to call them more superficial, but more face validity tools that are really helpful in this context, because you can go through them quite quickly. People get the gist and they can go, oh, I'm similar or different. And it's the purpose here is not the in-depth understanding of ourselves. The purpose is a high-level understanding of how we're going to get on together, and also where we might have natural clashes. So there's lots here of people happy to share stuff. We'll have to see how we can facilitate any of these things. I'll just say, if any of you are on LinkedIn and haven't joined our HR Uprising LinkedIn group, that might be a really good place to go. The links are at the end, because then you could maybe put things in, we can start the networking there. So as people say, yes, please, to what Simon's offering there. I think we'd all like to see more on this. I want to do a podcast on personality tools as well, so this is quite helpful. Okay, staying with the context that we're in here, the context we're in here is that we are trying to kick off a team to be successful. We have got a finite amount of time, so we can't go into an in-depth personality tool. The purpose is really to get to the point that everyone understands that everyone in the team is different and we all have unique strengths. If we value each other's strengths, we're more likely to be successful. Understanding each other is going to help us to utilize each other's strengths and minimize conflict. However, conflict is not necessarily a bad thing in teams, or certainly absence of conflict can be a bad thing. And we know that working virtually or remotely can affect our ability to get to know each other as individuals without effort. So it might reduce our likelihood to engage in healthy conflict, which sometimes results in ideas. So that's the purpose of it in this context. And it's thinking about these key points to reinforce at this stage if you've got a short period of time with people to kick off. Now, this Tuckman is probably one of the oldest tools ever, but it's so simple. You can go through it in about 5 minutes. People get the gist of it. And again, it's really helpful to explain it. So Tuckman basically proposed in the 60s that teams, high-performing teams, which is a key point here, and we're looking to be a high-performing team, they go through 4 stages. So you start with forming, where everyone's a bit shy, no one really wants to say anything, and everyone's sort of on their best behavior. As things proceed, they go through a storming stage, where we start to get to know each other a bit better. Some differences emerge, there may be some conflict. Now, in an ideal way, this is healthy conflict, absolutely, go for it, Kate. Thanks, Helen. So Helen's just put a question up which I've gone, what stage is the team you think you're in currently? So you can choose that while I run through them. So storming means you have healthy conflict, and you appreciate each other's differences, and if that is processed constructively, you then move through it to norming, where you go, okay, fair enough, we're different, but I value the differences and we're all working in our individual roles effectively. And then you go beyond that, where you really kind of got the hang of that. You go, oh, okay, I'm working individually, I respect others. Now I'm really capitalizing on the fact that Fred is awesome at spreadsheets. And, I don't mind standing up and doing his presentation. So then you get to performing as a team. Unfortunately, sometimes someone leaves and then they say go to reforming, and adjourning is another term. Doesn't really matter. The principle really for me is that many teams never actually get to storming, and actually in principle it's hard to get to performing if you haven't stormed at least a bit in there. So this is where, just in terms of the teams of people on here feel they're in, we feel people are in norming, forming, so all across it. So most people are norming, so I haven't quite got to that. I mean, it's hard because I don't know whether you're talking about a brand new team or a long established team. It's interesting if maybe you're in a team, you can even go back and do something like this to try and promote some healthy storming or differences. If you feel there's covert conflict that hasn't been outed, that can stop you from ever getting to performing. So people are just on best behavior, they're not being their true authentic selves, and you don't necessarily get the best out of each other. And again, it's not as easy to do virtually, but you could do this virtually and you could encourage some challenge, etc. there. We've shared the poll, have we? Fine, just this sorry, I was talking to the poll results and you couldn't see them. So that's where you guys are all saying. So all across the place, which is to be expected. In the context that we're in here, I won't ask what your teams are because it will vary from person to person, but it's just to see you're all in different stages, and be aware then what can you do to maximize or accelerate your ability to get through to performing as a group. Okay, so let's keep going. There's quite a bit of content in here, so hope you're okay with that. So challenges that you might have found with virtual teams. I have another poll here just for speed, because my chat window only shows me about 4 comments at a time for some reason. Otherwise I have to open it up and I see it hides my screen. I dare say that's my user error. So could you launch the challenges poll, please, Helen? Thanks. Okay, so I've just brain dumped a bunch of challenges. They may not be the ones that you think, but if we think about the fact that now we're more in a virtual world, you can put as many as you want, well, ideally up to about 3. I have put some challenges to do with being in a virtual team down here. Go for it. Tell me what you see the top 3 challenges are. And if you think I've missed something, please could you put that in the chat? Supervision and delegation challenges. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So actually getting things done and seeing whether people have done it and authorizing. Jen, do you mean by that in terms of people are either micromanaging or abdicating? Keep going, guys. You can keep on choosing. 41% have voted so far. Yep, accountability. So it's similar sort of thing, isn't it? Getting stuff done. That's going to link in. Okay. So last few results go if you want to keep on going. This question, barriers to effective. Would you ask a forming team barriers? Absolutely. So SNH, sorry, I don't know your first name, or unless it was Simon. Would I ask the forming team to, let me just go through these questions because these are quite good. So we're saying the ones outside of the poll, feel free to keep on polling those of you who haven't yet, are saying supervision, delegation, accountability. It's often the junior ones who, yeah, okay, so as people are new coming in and not getting the informal, the assumed stuff, I think that's really valid, the stuff of experience. So if you come into an established team, you can almost feel it's like you're not part of the gang, and then you might not feel able to ask to get that information out. So how can we bring people in. I don't know what ideas we've got there. I wonder about something like buddying. And then SNH said, would you ask the forming team this question? Because actually what you're saying, Jen, there, it sounds like that could be a reforming. So someone has come in to the team, but the team already feels established. Because that person is junior, they're having to just adapt and join in, but actually there needs to be a more formal sharing. So maybe I would definitely try and provide a way to get people talking about it. You know, this is the sort of question you could just pose on a virtual team meeting. What are we doing well? You could do a SWOT analysis. You know, what could we do differently? Are we making sure, is there other things that we've assumed? There's this term where they say you delete knowledge, that because you know something and you've known it for ages, let's say of an established team, you delete it. You don't even occur to you to teach it to somebody, and actually it's being aware of the fact that we're doing that. So yes, I would ask the forming team that. Absence of leadership and mission clarity. Yeah, yes, it can feel like that. So there needs to be more effort to do that. Is moving from monitoring stuff based on activity to results. 100% Daniel. I think that is the biggest challenge. I'm thinking lots about how we can do stuff on that. Biggest pain point. How do we do that? I mean, to be honest, that's what we always should have done. But the move to being more virtual is forcing the issue, isn't it? Okay, so Mark's saying people don't communicate. It's easier for those people who don't want to join in to do that virtually, isn't it? Just to be quiet. You have to almost pull them out. Again, you do need, therefore, not to have a leader who's just a hierarchical leader. You need to have someone who is a people person. And maybe that's where a team worker in Belbin, certainly a coordinator or team worker, might be better than someone who's more directive and in a hurry, because they're going to take the time to bring people out. Just reading down the rest of them. Got you, Jen. Different working styles or preferences, and again, so significantly different working styles or preferences. If we know that about people, then it's okay. So having something where you share the differences, however you do it, that makes a massive difference to people's ability to work together. Right, I like that. You can read for yourself down the comments. I won't dwell on it because I want to just keep going, because actually some of the things you're saying would also play into Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So this is a book, there's a book called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's quite easy to read. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but it's quite powerful. And again, if you introduce this to a team, you could take any one of these if it's an established team, whether it's Tuckman, whether it's can't pronounce it, Lencioni, or Belbin, or do an icebreaker. You could take any one of these separately and you get something from it. Anything that gets people to talk and think together slightly away, it's almost them sort of standing away, standing back from being in the team, is likely to bring value. So essentially, this model says that in order to build a team, you have to start at the bottom of the triangle. And if you don't have the aspects of this, you're not going to get to be successful. So someone did write on there that absence of commitment or accountability is a problem in those, and therefore quite often that's because the base, it wasn't set up for success in the first place. So this model, again, is quite helpful to say to people, to be a successful team, we have to avoid the 5 dysfunctions, and therefore we have to be prepared to commit to the team. We have to be prepared to get to know each other well enough to trust each other. And if there have been issues in the past where trust was damaged, then we need to deal with those. People who are afraid of conflict, if we think that conflict is a bad thing, and let's face it, some personality types hate conflict. So we have to make conflict safe and positive in 2 models here and in the Tuckman model. Conflict actually is part of the journey to being a successful team, and healthy conflict doesn't have to be upsetting. It's just about people being open and sharing, not being scared of differences. That's the key, but people will shy away from it. So again, pointing it out there, we might say, so where might we have a conflict? Have we got conflicts in personalities? Have we got conflict in time zones? Where have we got unspoken conflicts that we can address? So you could maybe flush those out. You get them talked about, then it will make a big difference. Then we go, actually, lack of commitment. Now, we've all been on teams where you've shown up and then people go, yeah, they take their actions, and then nothing happens and you don't go anywhere. And frankly, there's no point being in that team. Now, to an extent, I think this is about leadership, and it's about getting everyone to commit. And it's saying, don't just have the usual suspects. You're on this team, these are the commitments. But again, this comes back to my point that you actually need to set up for success and agree your ground rules ideally. And in an ideal world, you get your team. If you're the facilitator, you get the team to agree their ground rules, and at least one of them would be about keeping commitments. It would be about meeting timekeeping, and it would be about consequences of not keeping commitments. Or if you can't, it's about flagging it. If you address this as ground rules up front, you're much less likely to have these problems. Really dysfunctional teams, there'll be no accountability, it'll be a blame culture, and fundamentally, they won't have a clue what they need to do to be successful, and there's no attention to results. So I'd encourage you to maybe read more about that. If you listen on the podcast, I go through it in a little bit more detail. But again, these models, you share them with people and go, these are dysfunctions of a team. Are we guilty of these sometimes? And it all has to start at the bottom of the pyramid. That's the thing. You can't just go straight in on results. You've actually got to go through those phases to build up to be successful. I'll come back to your comment there, Mark. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep to time and there. So then what I would do if I was running this as a virtual change, I go, okay, so what's our team purpose, our ground rules and expectations? And if you're in a room together, you'd be on flip charts. So if you're doing it virtually, then divide people into virtual rooms, virtual flip charts. There's no reason why you can't still do that. And so get people to come up with their purpose, ground rules, expectations. It's your team charter. And then the consequences and how you're going to embed it. Now, there is something about where the accountability is about people being responsible for it. So saying people being busy, feeling of isolation. So, I mean, I do think now maybe, I know in certain professional services, you've got different types of line manager. Maybe there are, it sounds a bit naff, like going, you know, like social secretary. I don't mean that, but you get the team worker to be the one who does the social, who makes sure you have a team social, who creates that time because they value that naturally. Identify the people who have preferences for people and get them to have an accountability around that inclusiveness. If you are the leader and that's not your natural preference, plus you're accountable for the results, delegate some of those other accountabilities out to people. To help you operate more as a functioning team. That's what I would probably do. Micromanagement reduces willingness. Absolutely. It's totally true that micromanagement makes people less willing to be accountable. Covey has a statement, you can't hold people accountable if you supervise their methods, over supervise them. If you watch them step by step, and then basically they don't achieve, you can't hold them accountable because you micromanage them into that achievement. If you stand back and allow someone to agree how they're going to achieve something, to set that goal, and you agree the timeline, and then you let them get on with it with you there for support, then absolutely you can hold them accountable. So micromanagement, which I know people are doing through fear because they can't see people, that's something I think we've got to stop. Okay, so I will keep going. You can read the comments for yourself. These are some of the ideas that I have for avoiding dysfunction. I think there's more here. It's really great that you're chatting, guys, because it really stimulates thought and other ideas, and we're sharing ideas because it's a new way of being. But these are in no particular order. If we want to be as functional as possible, we need to make sure we're focusing on collective outcomes, getting people bought out into them. We need to get through conflict by drawing out differences of opinion, not just letting people be silent. So maybe if you're having a virtual team meeting, it is about, whereas you might get away with going around the table and letting people just chip in, you then just get the extroverts, maybe actually giving people, you know, everyone has a structure where everyone has to contribute something about how they feel or what they've achieved, and you give them the chance to think about that. Someone's coming into the waiting room now. I'm not sure what they're going to get here on the last slide. But draw out those differences of opinion. So perhaps have structures that people, particularly the more shy, reserved people, know they're going to be drawn upon to contribute in a certain way, so they can prepare for it. But find a way in which everyone gets heard. Also make sure there's clarity and make sure there's closure. So deadlines, this is normal teams. I say demand debate, but certainly encourage people to debate things, talk about things. If we are doing it all virtually, let's put people into meeting rooms with a topic where they've got to think in smaller groups, because there's a limit to how much debate you can get, well, on anything in a large group. So get them to go and talk about things and make recommendations. If you're leading, but make sure people feel safe to come and talk to you about stuff, that say that, you know, the way we get on, the human aspect is really what will stop the team from being successful. You cannot just achieve things, particularly virtually, just by focusing on task. We have to think about the human aspect. I'd also say ask for commitment and follow-up. So a coaching style is going to be far more effective in terms of getting things done than a tell style. And we all need to just be flexible and more self-aware. Those are just some ideas, and I'm sure you guys have got other ideas as well about avoiding dysfunction. By all means, pop them in here. So Sue actually said, let's pick up on some of these here. Just any other ideas you've got. So Sue's saying features where people can add to the chat or raise a hand. So you can do it online. You can almost do, been used for drawing out contributions earlier for people who wait in line. So you're actually using the hand wait, put the hands up. So clarity of purpose, Mark says, clarity of purpose, shared vision had a greater impact on effective team working than communication. Well, that makes sense to me because actually we all might make our own way to achieve the purpose. If we know where we're going, I mean, that's the same thing with objectives, really. If you just set a small objective, but people don't know why they've got the objective, they may interpret it in a way that to the letter that actually doesn't, that misses the point of it. You know, so the key here is if you actually know the purpose. So if the purpose, I won't give an example because I've got one in the book, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But actually, I think purpose is really key. Thank you for raising that. That's a really good point. Actually, having a culture of praise and recognition, I think that's a really nice one. You know, the setting up the purpose and expectations. I think a culture would be a nice question there. What's our culture? How do we, are we people? Are we results? Are we going to recognize that sort of thing? Actually encourage people to think about that up front. Mindful business charter is really helpful for this. Jennifer, you can add anything. And you said your legal ups previously. I don't know what a mindful business charter is, so feel free to jot more in the chat. So that's great. Thank you for your ideas. So that concludes the content of this. As I say, it was a sort of a layer within a layer of ideas of how we can build more effective teams. We're going to continue to do webinars. We're probably going to do 2 a month going forwards. The whole list is actually on our website. I'm not going to do them every week going forwards, but we will do them twice a month. Those are the ones that are coming up. So you have got 2 each week coming forwards. We're focusing on well-being in July. And in July and August, we're going to have a slightly different one where we will do the theme of well-being overall. And I think we're doing learning in September. I can't remember. Anyway, it's on the website and we'll share more about this. We'll message you and let you know what's going on. But we're going to open them up also to line managers. So I'm going to adjust most of them so far have been aimed at people predominantly in people management or management roles. So we've got predominance of people managers and HR on here. But I will also do 1 a month, which you could go, actually, I really need my line managers to do something about this. So you could sign them up for it as well if you wanted to. Obviously, you can share the links. So I'm going to try and adjust the tone of some of the ones going forward so that they're more useful to more of the people that you serve as well. So those are the links here. I'm just going to our final page and I'm going to put my links up here. By all means, add questions there. I'm going to put one final poll. So I realise I haven't been doing this, which considering I did learning and development for 20 years, which is pretty rubbish, is could we put the feedback poll up? I'm going to ask you, please could you rate how valuable for it? This is anonymous, so you say whatever you like. And if you have anything you want to say, I can't do a poll and do comments. So if there's anything you want to comment on other subjects that you found helpful, any other suggestions, you can either do it privately in the chat or directly in the chat. In terms of what we will send out to you, we will, as we have always done, we will send out, it takes a while, we have to get the recording there, we'll email you probably tomorrow, later today if the recording's done, a link to this. We'll also attach the slides so you can have them and use them and adapt them if they're of use to you. And there'll also be links to the HR Uprising podcast, particularly the episode that reinforces this. It's only 20 minutes, so it might be quite quick. And yeah, loads of people saying any connect. So guys, do, if you're not part of the LinkedIn group, because I can't send out your emails to each other. No, Pam, I can't send you a summary of the chat for GDPR reasons, I'm afraid. What we'll do is if there's key points or bullets we'll put in, but I can't just cut and paste the whole thing because it's of the names on there. So hence, if you want to join the LinkedIn HR Uprising group, go in there, then you can see each other if you like. You could almost go on a chat. I'd say who attended the webinar and you can chat in there. Planning culture. So yes, Karen, I know you. Yes, we know Karen. You know lots about culture and culture change programs, don't you, Karen? Oh no, it's actually Karen Gill. So, Karen, there's loads of I've got lots on that content in the book on the Change Superhero. If you go on changesuperhero.com, there's stuff on culture change there. And if you go back on the back catalogue of HR Uprising, hruprising.com, there's lots on there. And I think I'm going to actually I'm doing a webinar on culture change imminently. So thank you guys. Thanks for voting. Any of you, someone's given me a 2, so it wasn't very useful. I'd love to know why. You can message me privately for that one. They might have gone already. So I appreciate you being on here there, and we'll take that feedback from you. Thank you very much. Thanks, AVG. I still don't know what your name is. Thanks, Catherine. Okay, guys, I can see, I don't think there's any questions coming through private otherwise. So, oh, hang on, there is one new message. Angela. It's nice to put a name to it. I don't know, I feel like AVG is a technology or something. Thanks, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close it down. It's probably easier for everybody to close it down. We'll close the poll. Very much appreciate everyone for joining, and for closing, please, by all means, recommend other people to join as well.